the semester. We will start again in, it would be February, I believe, for next semester. Okay, so this is our last of many very interesting, hopefully you've been here, talks that have been given. Next semester, we have them usually about once a month. And so that will be the plan for next semester as well. And so I wanted to close it out, and we're closing it out with the coolest professor. And I'm not introducing her, but I just like to say her name. So Dr. Stronza is here with us today. And she is a wildlife expert, and really she's just doing some really neat things. So now that you have her name, you can look her up on Instagram and see all the neat things that she's doing. But I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Nick. Come on up and please introduce our speaker.
Yeah, hi folks. You don't have to come for me. My name is Nick Jacobson. I'm a new faculty member or new-ish faculty member here at the Honors College. I'm also the director of the Energy and Sustainability program in the Honors College. And it is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Amanda Stronza today. It's always an honor to introduce distinguished speakers, but Amanda was my PhD advisor. She was later my supervisor. And I was realizing as I was thinking about how to do this introduction that you've literally introduced me probably dozens, if not like 100 times at things like this. And I think this is my very first chance to do the same for you. So I'll do my best. I'm going to go off memory here, so I'm not giving you everything, just a little bit of the highlights. But it's a little bit hard to even know where to start. Amanda's had, you could argue she's had 3 full, different but connected careers, all of which are super impressive on their own, and she's done all 3 of them at the same time. And so she started her academic career, she did both her master's and her PhD at the University of Florida, and where she worked on conservation questions in the Peruvian Amazon. She specifically for her PhD was asking questions about this emerging idea of ecotourism as a strategy to link development and conservation. And this version of this concept was very new when Amanda was studying it. She worked with one of the very first integrated co-managed ecotourism projects of its kind. And so she kicked off her academic career. She did a postdoc at Stanford, and then she joined faculty at Texas A&M. And so that's kind of the first of her careers, is the traditional academic career. She's published dozens or over 100 really, really high impact peer-reviewed journal articles. She's edited books. She's published chapters in books. She has a really impactful academic publication record. And the beginning of that, maybe the first 15 years or so, was mostly focused on Peruvian Amazon or the Amazon in general, and these questions of how do humans that live there interact with the natural environment, hopefully finding ways to increasingly sustain that natural environment. And so that was around then is when I emailed her out of nowhere I emailed her cold. I was expecting to get the same response from all the other professors I emailed cold, which was no response, asking if I could join her lab, but she wrote me back right away. She welcomed me into her lab, so I joined as a PhD student at Texas A&M. And around then is when she had a big transition in her focus, at least in terms of location. She started working more in the Okavango Delta in Botswana, and she asked a similar but different question where she's looking now at human-wildlife conflict and coexistence. And so she's still wondering about, are there ways to incentivize humans and nature to be able to be more simpatico and reduce conflicts and increase coexistence. She's going to talk to us a lot about that today. So that's the first part of her career, which is really impressive. I tagged along. I did my PhD in Botswana too. It was really amazing. But she also, at the same time, before I started my PhD program, she secured funding she got a multi-million-dollar grant from NSF to start an interdisciplinary conservation training program, PhD training program at Texas A&M. I was one of the first students that was able to go through that program. A very integrative and really great example of interdisciplinary training and scholarship, which has a lot of resonance for the Honors College. And then after I joined, She also secured funding, another multi-million-dollar grant from the Howard Buffett Foundation to start an NGO, a nonprofit called Coexist, working on human-elephant coexistence in Botswana, which she still works very closely with this group. It's still operational today. So that's kind of the second full career that she's done. And then thirdly, she's gotten more and more interested and worked more and more on more specific outreach things that are kind of outside the scope of traditional academia. She might not be talking to us as much about that today, but you'll quickly see she's an incredible photographer. She could be a professional photographer. You're going to see a lot of her photos. She's leveraged that in a lot of really cool ways for outreach and promotion of conservation. She also has started and still working on a really, really fascinating project with animal memorials. And I don't want to take too much time, so I won't explain that, but please go and look at her website if that sounds interesting to you. And then personally, I can just say that I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for Amanda. And I didn't even realize, following her footsteps in my academic philosophy. When I got here, though, is when I really realized that the interdisciplinary part of the training is completely interwoven with how I think about the world and how I teach and all that stuff. So it's, even though I'm teaching energy now, totally different topic or a slightly different topic, it's still been so nice to see how all those things have come back and helped me. So I really want to welcome Amanda, and with that, let's welcome her up to the stage.
Nick, I think this is your phone. Somebody's phone. Thank you all so much. Nick, I have to tell you right away that I'm very prone to crying, and that introduction almost made me cry. So I'm so honored to be here. I'm sort of blown away by all of you. I didn't know that you had all this going on in Houston, and I'm just very, very grateful for the welcome. And I have a talk that's about 40 minutes, but because this space is so wonderful and all of you are so, can we just go for a few hours? I'm just kidding. I promise I won't do that. Okay. So what I'm sharing today is part of a new journey for me. I have been on a path of trying to understand and address human-wildlife conflict, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a moment. But now I'm taking a turn on the path towards coexistence, and where this path leads is very exciting to me, and I hope it will be for all of you too. But we're going off-road a little bit into the bushes today. Here's my plan for the talk. I'm going to start with a discussion of human-wildlife interactions as a field of study. I'm going to discuss how conservationists tend to see through a prism of problems, relying on narratives of conflict, and how our solutions, which are to mitigate, compensate, relocate, separate, otherwise keep animals away from humans, reinforces old ideas about people and nature. I'm going to share how we're starting to talk more and more about coexistence and how we have so much to learn from local and indigenous communities, especially using ethnography, that is learning from and with people, and also multi-species ethnography, which is learning from and with animals. Now, when I say animals throughout the presentation, please know I mean other animals. I recognize that we humans are animals. I also see animals as people too. I will share experiences from Botswana, India, and Nepal, and then I'm going to close with implications for all of this. How does it affect how we think and feel and interact with animals? I'm going to rest on this blank slide for a moment to give you my take-home message. Is the sound okay back there? Are you picking me up? Can everyone hear me? Okay. Take-home message. Where we see conflict, we can also see coexistence. As conservationists, we have tended to talk about conflict as the norm, something to expect. Animals are hard to live with. Humans are hard to live with too. But if we are attentive to the voices and experiences of indigenous people, we can see that coexistence has long been the norm. And when we dig a little deeper, we can see that coexistence has sometimes or often been disrupted by the very things we hold most dear in conservation. Things like parks, reserves, wilderness areas, these places that keep wildlife separate from humans, even though we know that historically they've been home to both. We may see that by holding up these dualisms of people in one place, nature in another, we have disrupted coexistence and generated even more conflict, what we call conflict now, than we might have seen otherwise. So before I get into it, I want to acknowledge many teachers and collaborators. What I'm talking about today is what I care the most about, how humans relate to animals, how we see them and regard them, how we talk about them, how and why we value them and protect them, and also the opposite. How and why do we disregard, vilify, endanger, or just ignore? Over the past 30 years, I've been so lucky to see and learn about so many wild animals through the eyes and experiences of people who know them best, indigenous people in various communities in the Amazon, the Ese'eja, the Takana, the Ribereños, the Achuar, and in southern Africa, the Hambukushu, the Baye, the Basarwa especially. They come from different histories and traditions, different environments, but what they all know, what they share is an intimacy with animals, knowing them as neighbors, ancestors, and kin. What I'm sharing today comes from my conversations and research with lots of people, most recently Dr. Helena Jolly, who's a conservation biologist and professor in Vermont. So much of what I'm sharing comes from the past 12 years of work and teamwork in Botswana with Drs. Anna Songhurst and Graham McCulloch, co-founders of the NGO we established called Coexist in the Okavango Delta, and with many, many people across 15 villages and many, many elephants as well in that part of Botswana. Also in Botswana, my teachers include Cheetah Conservation Botswana and one of my current PhD students, Otsabile Bahetuleng. Together we're learning about how ranchers in the Kalahari are living with cheetahs and lions and wild dogs and other predators. And your very own Dr. Nick Jacobson was my teacher as well. As he mentioned, we learned together about human-lion interactions in Botswana before he came to your honors college. For the stories in Nepal, I'm building on my new research with my PhD student, Amir Paldel. Lots more about that. I will say, this is the section on my teachers. Many animals have been my teachers. If I thanked them all, I'd never finish, or maybe I'd never get started. But I will say that elephants in particular have shaped my thinking in a lot of ways. And two dogs. Sorry. Sorry, I don't know why I do this. Why do I show this picture? Two dogs are especially dear to me. The late Matilda on the left and current Petunia have made me who I am. And I just want to say, too, that photography is at the heart of my work. I learn a lot about seeing through my lens, and I hope that the images I share in the presentation today will convey just some of the love and respect I feel for the people and animals in my stories, the humans and animals in my stories, because all animals are people. Okay. So everywhere in the world, humans are living with wildlife, competing for space and resources, often with challenges. This is the Challenges Forum, right? So this is what I'm talking about. The challenges include things like protecting your crops from elephants or monkeys or birds. It's safeguarding your livestock from wolves or lions or other predators. Living with wildlife can be a challenge in affecting your food security, your mental well-being, your ability to sleep or go to work or go to school. Living with dangerous animals can disrupt your livelihood, your whole way of life, your very life. Now, you don't have to live with tigers to know the challenges. Here in Texas, we struggle to keep squirrels out of our bird feeders, grackles from our parking lots. We struggle to avoid colliding with deer on the highway or protecting our pets from coyotes. Now, if you're a coyote or an elephant, a wolf or a raccoon, it is no picnic living with humans either. We have a way of altering and destroying your homes, blocking your access to water, treating you as pests, maybe worst of all, paying no attention to you whatsoever. So there's a whole field devoted to understanding these challenges. It's focused mostly on conflict. Some in the field are concerned with helping humans live with animals, others the reverse. And you can see that this field has grown a lot in the past 30 years. This curve is just showing the scientific papers referencing specifically human-wildlife conflict. And there's a curve like this, not published, that I've seen that reflects as well the number of conservation projects focused on human-wildlife conflict. The framing around conflict can instill the notion that humans and animals are in opposition, even adversaries. It can lead to conservation measures that instill that are all about the notion of separating humans from wildlife. So like I mentioned, creating parks and reserves, erecting fences, barriers, and deterrents, or preventing and mitigating encounters by culling, translocating, or killing the animals we call problems. These measures can reinforce the sense that humans are separate from nature, different and exceptional. This follows centuries of Western colonial and religious ideologies and institutions. The anthropologist Elizabeth Marshall Thomas wrote, "Ever since the Neolithic, we have distanced ourselves from other species, modifying our language, our laws, and our thoughts accordingly. A person is either a he or a she. An animal is an it. We have thoughts. They have instincts. We have language. They have vocalizations. We have culture. They just run around in the woods doing whatever it is they do." We see this reflected in our scientific disciplines. It's why we have anthropology on the one hand and zoology on the other, paw or hoof. This divide persists despite a well-documented understanding of how culture and nature are entwined. Even the wildest of wild lands are anthropogenic, reflecting cultures, beliefs, and practices of humans. This forest in Tambalpata, Peru, my long-term study site in the Amazon, is also the native community of Infierno. It's home to many families of peccaries, monkeys, wild trees, and also humans and their forested gardens. And even the most civilized of our societies, if we can say that about Austin, are shaped by mountains, aquifers, plants, animals, soil, and rocks. We know this, right? We know the truth of connection and coexistence, and yet we often fail to acknowledge it. Okay, take a drink. I want to take us to a story of people and elephants in Botswana. And here is a place where the discourse, my own included over the years, has advanced a narrative of conflict, of human-elephant conflict. And I'm going to talk about it that way. If you pay attention to elephants in the media, maybe you've heard a lot about the ivory trade, illegal hunting for ivory, debates around trophy hunting, more recently, elephants charging at safari vehicles. Maybe you know that elephant populations, all species, are in steep decline. The global population of elephants is just 7% of what it was 100 years ago. By one estimate, we lost 100,000 elephants, African elephants, in just 3 years. But there is another story to know about elephants, especially in southern Africa, where populations are thriving. And that's a story of conflict with people. So a healthy elephant population, as you can imagine, needs lots of room to roam. There is no single reserve or park anywhere in the world that has enough suitable habitat to sustain big populations of elephants. So the elephant range necessarily overlaps with human settlements. Elephants must live among us or not at all. And it is in these places of competition for space and resources that we find what we call conflict. So if you're human, conflict comes in the form of elephants trampling or eating your crops. It comes in the form of they're destroying your property or fences. It comes in the form of sometimes endangering you or your family. Elephants are not predators, but they can be very dangerous, especially if they are startled or feel threatened. They can charge. So people who live with elephants experience a whole host of invisible stress, psychological, social, emotional stress of living with elephants. It's not like living with Dumbo or Babar. Elephants are not always gentle giants. Where did I go? Sorry about that. So if you're an elephant, conflict comes in the form of people destroying your crops or blocking your access to water. It comes in the form of people harassing you or chasing you or killing you. For elephants, elephants also experience a whole host of invisible emotional, psychological, and social stress of living with humans. So human-elephant conflict threatens the lives and livelihoods of people who live with elephants, and it is an existential threat to populations of elephants and long-term survival of elephants. These challenges are especially acute in Botswana. So Botswana is the country with the largest population of elephants on the planet, 130,000 elephants, which is 1/3 of all African elephants live in Botswana, which happens to be the size of Texas. So just imagine 130,000 elephants. How do you think Texans would do with that? I don't know. I don't like to think about that. The Okavango Delta in northern Botswana is especially important. The water source in the middle of the Kalahari Desert is an incredible oasis for big populations of elephants and other wildlife. And though elephant populations have been declining everywhere in the world, in Botswana, the population has tripled in the past 20 years. And this is likely due to in-migration from neighboring countries of Namibia, Angola, and Zambia. This is a recent article noting how people of Botswana wouldn't mind if some of their elephants moseyed on to other countries. It's a real challenge to live with such a big population. Nowhere have increases in the elephant population been as dramatic as in a region of northern Botswana called the Okavango Panhandle, where elephants outnumber the human population. So this is an area about the size of Yellowstone National Park, but it's not a park or a reserve. It's an area that's delimited primarily by a veterinary fence to the south, the border with Namibia, and the deep channel of the Okavango River. And those three limit easy migration or movement, either by elephants or people. If you drive a 170-kilometer dirt road that connects the 15 villages there, you'll hear people speaking 5 different languages. You'll see a real mix of traditions and livelihoods. For thousands of years, this has been the homeland of the San people, hunters and gatherers of the Kalahari. More recently, this is home to other cultural groups, the Hambukushu and Baye. People live by lots of different means. They are subsistence producers, so they gather grasses and reeds and lilies from the delta. They collect wild fruits and building materials and firewood from the woodlands. They fish, they raise cattle, and they are farmers. Farming here is incredibly challenging. This is their soil. It's basically sand. They depend on rainfall in the Kalahari for water, which is increasingly unpredictable with climate change. People make do with very, very little here. Most people don't have things like pumps for irrigation. Almost no one has motorized transport to carry their water or produce. It is a very beautiful place with very beautiful people, and it's really hard to live here. They're just so remote, and they really lack access to most amenities. And they're farming in sand with unpredictable rainfall. The resources, there's almost no markets here. There's some employment tied with the safari industry, but otherwise there's no markets. The main sort of material resources they have are cell phones, donkey carts, and each other. And importantly, they live surrounded by thousands of elephants. At certain times of year, just when the rains have stopped, and people are starting to harvest from their fields, elephants in big numbers, in the thousands, start moving southward to the permanent water of the Okavango Delta. To do that, they have to pass through the villages on a road like this. And as they approach the villages, they'll hear people shouting and banging drums and dogs barking, and they'll smell the fires burning, maybe some chili pepper smoke. There's a lot of effort to keep the elephants away or to deter themselves. But the elephants move through always because they must. They know these pathways. They must get to the water. I'm going to share with you a clip we filmed of the elephants moving on one of these pathways. It's silent, which is appropriate because shockingly and amazingly, even hundreds of elephants can move right beside you in total silence. Let me see if this clip works. Okay. I'll talk a little more about that behavior a little later in the presentation. But I just want to say for now, when the elephants come through, many will enter farmers' fields, and then they will eat or trample the crops. And that happens yearly to 600 or 700 farmers' fields. And this is a main manifestation of what we say is conflict. But conflict also involves death. So on average, 1 or 2 people in this area per year are killed by an elephant, and an average of 20 elephants are killed per year. There is no denying that human-elephant interactions in the Panhandle are challenging, and the conflict is real. This isn't just an academic idea or conservationist overthinking this. This is very real. So the policy and the conservation response to this has been to mitigate damage, to compensate people for losses, to incentivize deterrence, and otherwise prevent humans and elephants from crossing paths. So 12 years ago, my colleagues and I came together with very generous funding from the Howard Buffett Foundation, and very close collaboration with people in all 15 villages to create a trust called Coexistence. And our focus is to support efforts to share space between elephants and people in this area. And we wanted to change the narrative, to not focus solely on conflict, but we wanted to look at a landscape perspective and see a social ecological system where people and elephants are living together, and think about what are the needs of elephants and their families in this area, and what are the needs of humans, and how can we think about both? How can we think about coexistence even in the face of conflict? Okay, so I'm going to come back to that, but I want to shift a little bit and share some of the literature in thinking about all of this. Many conservationists now are thinking about coexistence rather than just conflict. And we're learning that coexistence is not just a passive condition. It's not just the other side of conflict. Rather, it is the result of conscious efforts. In 2023, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature said coexistence is a choice people are making. An off-cited definition tells us coexistence is a sustainable though dynamic state where humans and wildlife co-adapt to sharing landscapes. But a lot of what we can learn about coexistence is not written, at least not in the scholarly literature. It comes from people in indigenous and local communities, places where coexistence has been the norm for a long time, the norm rather than the exception, where people see themselves as part of rather than apart from nature. Conflicts do occur, but within the context of coexistence, something like a family. This has always been the case, but seldom examined in a coupled, connected way. That people-nature dualism I mentioned, that anthropocentric way we see and study things, has tended to block our view. Historically, anthropologists paid little attention to animals. Animals were mentioned in ethnographies, but typically in relation to how they were used or valued by humans. This is Margaret Mead, by the way. We can say the same of field biology, which has conventionally studied wildlife separately. Humans get mentioned, but mostly as problematic and encroaching. We're learning to be more integrative. We're getting better at dropping the dualisms. Multi-species ethnography is one approach that offers a different lens. Rather than seeing animals in one place where they are supposed to be and humans in another, we're starting to think about humans and animals, how they coexist in a shared landscape. I want to show you this composite image. I'm sorry, each image is a little bit blurry, but this is the same spot in the Okavango Panhandle, just about 15 minutes apart. It shows elephants, humans, and dogs using the very same spot on the very same road. I have a fourth image that shows cows moving through. I don't know why I didn't take a picture of that. So this way of thinking involves decentering humans. It's seeing not just human responses to animals, but also animal responses to humans. It's seeing how other animals are subjects too, not just objects of study or resources or populations, but also as individual, rational, sentient beings who make decisions, who have cultures of their own. That's kind of a radical idea. Can we say elephants have culture? Animals who have histories of interacting with humans. It's seeing how animals live in relation to humans. So one of my favorite examples of multi-species ethnography comes from this wonderful author, Marcus Baines-Rock. He used this approach in his study of humans and hyenas in Ethiopia. There's a city there called Harar, where the wild hyenas live among humans. And humans know the hyenas as individuals. Marcus described co-adaptation between humans and hyenas, and he wrote of both sides. He wrote of individuals, both hyena and human, and how they share a community and how they are entangled in each other's lives. In many indigenous societies, animals are perceived as kin. In her book, Wild Dog Dreaming, Deborah Bird Rose described kinship between indigenous Australians, plants, and animals, and how people saw endangered species as dying members of family. In her book, Kinship with Monkeys, Loretta Cormier wrote of the Guajá people in Brazil, and how they see howler monkeys as family, protecting them, even as they hunted them. In my own work in the Peruvian Amazon, the Eseeja, people have taught me how the white-lipped peccaries are their ancestors, and they know and revere them, even as they hunt them. So this feeling of kinship doesn't mean, oh, I don't touch, I don't interact, I don't hunt, but it's thinking about that relationship in a different way than I think in Western science we tend to. Okay, so this is relevant to coexistence because it makes us think about relationships and decisions. What are humans doing and what are the animals doing that reflect choice and co-adaptation? How can such relationships be supported and sustained? Do you see how just asking these questions takes us beyond conflict? I want to turn for a moment to introduce you to Helena Jolly's work in India, her work among the Adivasi people and wild animals. She's written of how people engage with wild animals here as part of an extended ecological family. She learned that the Adivasis see animals as having the ability to think, evaluate, and respond. They understand elephants and tigers, for example, for who they are, what they do, and choose to do as sentient beings. They're not just eating, mating, and fighting out of instinct, right? But adjusting their behaviors as humans adjust to theirs. So they say animals protect themselves as people do. They can either kill or make a sound and leave without hurting people. It's a decision. They're individuals who might be good or troublesome. It just depends. This is how we talk about humans too, right? Some people are good, not so much others. I'm thinking of one, I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to go there today. Sorry. The Adivasis taught Helena that they see animals as part of a larger social ecological order, with the same rights to space. They often refer to animals as our own people. They explained incidents like elephant attacks by saying, "We were in the elephant's area. The animal felt threatened. It was not the elephant's mistake, it was ours." These perceptions shape how people behave. For example, giving way to animals while walking in the forest, respecting animals' personal space, sharing forest food with animals, and even, I think this is most fascinating, even speaking politely, being aware of how they speak when they're in the forest among their kin. These are decisions more than passive acceptance. So Helena's work is influencing, we have an article under review at Conservation Biology right now about all of this. And her work is influencing my newer work in Nepal, where discussions about living with wildlife tend to revolve around the charismatic species like elephants and tigers and leopards. And with my PhD student, Amir Paudal, we're learning about local experiences of living with a much more common species and much cuter, the rhesus macaque. In Nepal, macaques are described as pests who raid crops, steal food, and attack humans. Policymakers have said, they talk about the monkey terror, and they say that it's escalating. Farmers, especially in the mid-hills of Nepal, are exasperated. Many have called for exporting macaques to other countries. The general notion is that macaques belong somewhere separate from humans. I'm going to show you another video clip that this is one Amir took in one of his study sites in one of the farming villages. This one does have some sound. You're going to hear Amir reacting. I can see the thing here, I just can't, oh, there we go, thank you. Okay. It's a little hard to see, but you're gonna see, suddenly you're gonna see a whole bunch of macaques, and then a farmer in the farming terraces, and then someone running to chase them away. It's like the landscape coming to life, right? Okay. So it's It's not easy to live with macaques, but humans and macaques and, dogs also have long shared space in Nepal. Both species are highly adaptable and flourish in all kinds of environments, in landscape, in cities, in farms, and forests. But changes in Nepal in recent years, over the past few decades, have disrupted that coexistence. More and more people are migrating to cities, leaving agricultural land and fallow, and then fewer people in the villages left behind to protect the crops from the macaques. Meanwhile, wild forests are being converted to commercial forest in Nepal, so there's more ostensibly forest habitat for macaques, but not with the species that they depend on. And so macaques are sort of moving everywhere as humans are as well. And what Amir has been learning through his ethnographic research is that coexistence has long been the norm between humans and macaques in wild forests, where the macaques share space with the Raute indigenous people. So the Rautes are among the last of nomadic peoples in the world. They number 600, and they very vehemently resist outsiders' notions of development and pressure to settle. They have no written history, no written language. They live mostly by hunting and gathering. They have some trade in woodwork that they make in exchange for what they can't forage in the forest. They own no property, only what they can carry, their entire homes and babies on their back. And they pick up and resettle every few weeks. And Amir, in doing ethnographic work that is living with and among them, he picks up and resettles every few weeks too, which is a big deal because he grew up in the city of Kathmandu, quite a different. To the Rautes, the forest is home, peopled by tigers, bears, monkeys, birds, trees, and other sentient beings. They say all are capable of having meaningful conversations. In the Raute's cosmological sense of family, the macaques are sometimes known as little brothers. They have personalities and particular skills. One man told Amir, the monkeys know how to avoid places that lack food and water. They find prime spots. So the Rautes follow the macaques. And they guide the Rautes to fruits and medicines. They say that they also signal the presence of leopards that can be really dangerous. And the Rautes hunt the macaques, and they believe the monkeys were given to them as food, while other animals were given to tigers and to humans in other places. So the macaques, but they're more than sources of protein. They're also a way of life for the Raute. Even a sense of who the Raute are, even the essence of being Raute, is to live with the macaques and hunt them. One elder said, "We want to go from this earth along with the monkeys if they decide not to live here." This is a story of coexistence, sharing the forest and flourishing together. Okay, now I want to return to the story of people and elephants in Botswana. First, I shared a narrative of conflict, and now I want to talk about coexistence in the very same place, in the very same communities. Conflict is here, and so is coexistence. So African elephants have long featured in the lifeways of African communities. For thousands of years, the San people of the Kalahari relied on elephants for meat, hide, ivory, and bone. In the 1700s, the Humbukushu followed the elephants from the Zambezi region to the waters of the Okavango Delta, and now today elephants are their totems. Essentially, elephants shape where and how people live, and also vice versa. Like humans, elephants are highly intelligent, long-lived. They are capable of building knowledge collectively, capable, if that's the right word, of having culture. They learn to move and behave in ways differently depending on the risks. We can see these responses in a number of ways. Remember the elephants moving through the village. They follow certain pathways that they've learned over generations. That notion that an elephant never forgets is true. When the watering holes in the woodlands begin to dry, as I said, they move through the villages just when people are harvesting from their fields. So this is where we really see conflict. But we know from Anna Songhurst's research that elephants, they're not targeting fields. They're not in the habit of crop raiding, which is what you would read in the literature on human-elephant conflict. They're opportunistic. So if a farmer's field is near or in one of those main movement pathways that they've used for generations, they smell the crops. Elephants have an incredible sense of smell. So the closer a farmer's field is to one of those main pathways, the more likely an elephant is going to say, hey, don't mind if I do, and come into one of those fields. But there is rhyme to their reason. They are thinking and behaving rationally. I'm going to show you another film clip with some words from one of our collaborators, a farmer in the village of Gunut Soha, explaining this. It's quiet, isn't it? Should I start that over?
If you look at an elephant, it is an innocent animal. As farmers, we create problems by cultivating in elephant pathways. They use distinctive pathways that are used daily to get to the resources. If you get land board to allocate your field within the pathway, elephants will have no pathway to use, and they will destroy your crops.
So, short of staying out of pathways, people use a lot of different strategies to deter elephants from their fields. And people will say, oh, elephants are very clever. Well, we're thinking of new ways to protect our fields. They're busy thinking of new ways to eat our crops. I think they're exactly right. Two of our PhD students and fellows with the Coexistence Trust looked at how elephants and people are mindful of each other in this part of the world. Lauren Redmore and Aaron Buholtz combined data from ethnography and spatial ecology to see how people and elephants share trees. So when elephants browse, and that's the term we use when they're foraging, they break branches from the trees, and then the dead wood that falls to the ground is ideal for firewood. It's so common for people to harvest elephant-felled firewood that they often harvest intentionally near or in the main movement corridors, despite the risks. So to learn more about this, Lauren did focal follows with people gathering firewood to see where they went. And then Aaron did the same, basically seeing where the elephants went for their, which trees they were browsing. And they discovered that people and elephants were relying on many of the same species. Even more remarkably, in fact, they were often coming to the very same trees, but at different times. Elephants at night, people during the day. So if we looked at human-elephant interactions only through the lens of conflict, we would miss this interaction, this relationship. Living with elephants can be good in a way, not in another. It's complicated. A chief in the village of Mohembo East said, elephants eat our crops, but they are still as important to us as the trees. Another man said, the elephants are doing a good job on the wood, but they bring sorrow and sadness to our fields when they destroy everything. In another analysis, we studied data from elephants that we had collared to see where their movements around water points and settlements, human settlements of different sizes. And we found that elephants accessed water day and night in places where there were fewer humans, smaller human settlements, and only at night in bigger settlements. So they're avoiding, by decision, places that have more people. So again, this thing we see of the elephants crossing through the villages when they use those time-worn pathways, they also tend to come at dusk and through the night. And they cluster many family groups of elephants at a time for a kind of safety in numbers. what this shows, what I want you to get from this, is that elephants are sensitive to humans. They modify when and where they go. And they're trying to avoid direct encounters with humans, even though they're sharing that same landscape. And we can see humans doing the same thing. People plan when and how they move through the woodlands, when they're going to gather firewood. One woman said, I harvest at 9 a.m. before it gets too hot, but not too early because of the elephants. So we see a mutual avoidance, even as they share the same landscape, a kind of co-adaptation. So our work with Coexistence, a big part of that has been not teaching people how to be, but rather learning from them, looking to what they're already doing. What are people and elephants already doing to coexist? And how can we sustain and support that? One of our main efforts has been to demarcate and protect the main movement corridors. There's a whole other lecture about that, about the process of working closely with government offices and local leaders in these communities to translate research into policy. And the research is on, understanding when and where and in what numbers the elephants move to identify what those main movement corridors are. But for now, I just want to highlight that we're building on the knowledge and memory of both people and elephants to sustain coexistence. And these main movement corridors, there's 13 of them, are protected, codified into law, or protected from future development or from placement of farmers' fields. And the flip side of doing that is that now that the farmers know where the main movement pathways are, it's safer for them to know now they know where it's safer to place their fields and plant their fields. A second way we're trying to support coexistence is celebrating arts, hosting cultural affairs, we call them Life with Elephants, and nurturing community-based tours and microenterprises. We call it building an elephant economy. This is a way to generate benefits for people who live with elephants while also celebrating their knowledge. It's putting a spotlight on this part of the world and saying, if you love elephants, if you care about elephants, one of the best ways to support them is to support the people who live with elephants. Okay, so for all the positive stories and quotes I'm sharing, I could share with you stories of frustration, anger, and despair. I can give you stories of conflict, very sad ones, and I don't mean to make you think that it's easy for people to live with elephants or that it's easy for elephants to live with people. I don't mean to make you think that coexistence is just a different way of seeing. My aim is to ask us to see more than conflict. I want to repeat the clip I showed earlier that was silent of the elephants crossing, and now there's a voiceover from one of our team members in Coexist. He's from the village of Erdeca. Oops.
Our forefathers had these songs about animals. They had songs about lions. They had songs about buffaloes. They had songs about elephants. Elephants have been there for a very long time, before I was born and before my father was born. We have seen a big change. These elephants are very important because we would like the next generation to see them. I'm not saying that there's no conflict between elephants and people, but what I'm saying is elephants are our babies, because even if you have a child, they might have a conflict with you. So I'm saying elephants are our babies. We've got to look after them.
Okay, as I close, I want to ask, when we think about human-wildlife interactions, do we imagine animals in one place, humans in another? Can we see how this presupposes separation, and conflict? Can we see how this way of thinking deepens divides and helps justify what we call fortress conservation, creating parks without people, making traditional livelihoods impossible or illegal, and finding ways to push, compel, move, chase, relocate, or otherwise separate humans from other animals. And when we imagine coexistence, how do we see it? Is it tolerance, something that implies passive resignation, nothing else to do? Does it just work in some places? Can we also see conscious, active efforts of humans to live with and engage with wildlife? And can we see how animals partake as well in this uneasy dance, avoiding and minimizing direct overlap in space and time with humans? When we are open to the idea of coexistence, then we can be open to learning from indigenous and local communities in India, Nepal, Botswana, Texas, everywhere, about human relationships with wildlife. We can see through their eyes, learn from their stories and knowledge, how animals are more than resources or objects of use, more than problems or pests or predators, but also beings who give and take and live with humans in shared landscapes, beings who are individuals with personalities and life experiences who make decisions too, and sometimes cause problems and sometimes create conflict, who sometimes eat crops and kill livestock and turn on humans. This is not to imagine perfect harmony or fairy tale or Disney. It is not to see indigenous people as romantic or ecologically noble. It is to see that conflict is part of coexistence, and it always has been. It is to support more inclusive forms of conservation, listening more attentively with humility. People whose families have lived for generations with the animals we care about know a lot. We have so much to learn from them and a lot to gain from partnering in the true spirit of collaboration. Conservation can shift from protecting resources to sustaining relationships, adopting multi-species perspectives rather than human-centric ones. It can be seeing and supporting interconnectedness, humans as a part of nature rather than a part. And that is my last slide. Thank you very much.